Thank you, Henry, and everybody at the library. It's been a real pleasure working with these folks, and they do a stellar job, and I really appreciate these opportunities. I'm going to read some stuff, and then I'm going to introduce, and then I'm going to get out of the way. Art in the Loop is a nonprofit organization dedicated to commissioning public art for downtown Kansas City. Our mission is to contribute to the visual identity, enrichment, and revitalization of downtown Kansas City, create new opportunities for artistic development, and expand public interaction with new art of excellence. Art in the Loop seeks to play a proactive role in bringing further attention to Kansas City as a place where exciting and accomplished contemporary art is not just a happening, but is in fact helping to define the city's identity. Art in the Loop is a partnership between the Kansas City Art Institute, the Kansas City Municipal Art Commission, and the Downtown Council of Kansas City, among others. I gotta say, there's a lot of people who have been helping us. This is a collaboration stemming from shared interests in the downtown area and the cultural life of the city. Belief in the potential for artists to meaningfully contribute to urban revitalization and sense of place, and a desire to leverage each partner's resources and expertise toward distinguishing Kansas City as a unique, vital, and visually distinctive place. And of course, with that brand new feature on the hill, we all know what that's about. Art in the Loop's primary focus is the public realm of downtown Kansas City, specifically the downtown loop as defined by I-70, I-670, and I-35. Art in the Loop is particularly interested in commissioning projects for highly visible locations and public gathering places, where they can be experienced on both pedestrian and vehicular levels by a large and diverse population, all toward maximizing accessibility and benevolent impact. And I would be remiss, we have both of our previous executive directors here. Would you guys stand? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but Kate Hackman and Robin Trafton are both here, and they've been instrumental in this program is because of their great work, there's no question. And Ann Holliday has been working on it recently. And actually, I would also be remiss, several of our board members here, would you all just stand up and take a little bit of a nod? It's been a great board. Thank you all. Several of the board members started this some 6 years ago, and I don't think any of us knew what ride we were getting on when we started. It's been quite an interesting one. And thus far, we've overseen the installation of 4 projects in the downtown loop. Uplifted Arms, which was installed in 2005 by Davin Watney and Dylan Mortimer at the 10th and Main KCATA Transit Center. Art Wall, which was installed in 2006 and offers a changing exhibition space for two-dimensional artists. New artwork is installed twice yearly on this billboard type space at 13th Street between Grand and Walnut on the Town Pavilion parking garage, and Celestial Flyways, which was installed in 2008 by Laura DeAngelis and Davison Architecture and Urban Design at 12th and Walnut in the Oppenstein Brothers Memorial Park. And we are working currently on the Commons with Julia Cole and Lee Rosser, which is being installed at the alleyway off of Baltimore between 10th and 11th Street. So that's our most recent project that is underway. These innovative public art projects require partnerships with numerous entities, and we dearly appreciate the enthusiastic help we receive from property owners, stakeholders, and supporters. I'm now pleased to introduce Jack Becker. Jack is founder and executive director of Forecast Public Art, which was established in 1978. As a public artist and program administrator, Jack specializes in projects that connect the ideas and energies of artists with the needs and opportunities of communities. He has organized more than 70 exhibitions, 50 publications, and numerous special events. Jack received a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, studying under such artists as Sia Armajani and Andrew Lester. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, Jack also studied there at Washington University and Webster University, as well as the Croydon College of Art and Design in Great Britain. Widely published in the field, he also serves as the publisher of Public Art Review. And through his work and our professional friendship, I now have the opportunity to say, Jack has been a tremendous mentor to me, both professionally through the magazine, but also as a friend. I've known Jack now for probably 15 years in our various capacities in public art. And so it is my true pleasure to introduce Jack Becker.
Well, it's great to see everyone. How are you all doing tonight? Great. Ready to talk about public art? Me too. Well, let's just see. I'm going to give you a little background about myself and tell you a little bit more about forecast, because a lot of people, you know, they go, what's forecast besides the weather or the economic predictions? But after Minneapolis College of Art and Design, which I graduated in '76, I ended up getting a job with the CETA program. And I don't know if any of you know labor history in this country, but in the late '70s, the CETA program is a federal jobs training program, Comprehensive Employment Training Act. It put artists to work for a few years all over the country. And in Minneapolis, the program was called City Art Productions. And I was one of 60 artists in the program. And they gave me a desk and a phone at City Hall. I felt completely unprepared for this new job. And they said my job title was gallery director, which I thought was interesting because I've never been a gallery director. And then they said, by the way, there is no gallery. The gallery is the city. And you're going to organize exhibitions of CETA artists at the library and the government center and parks and plazas. And here's your desk and here's your phone, now get to work. And that was my graduate education. I realized that I was now a bureaucrat. And as a sculptor, familiar with found object sculptures, I thought this is just like bureaucracy, found object sculptures. It's about connecting things in the city, the raw materials of the city, and putting them together to make things happen. And I actually realized I could do that. That's a job I could do. Who knew? So after the year is up, all the artists go on unemployment. And I was one of those people out of work and came upon a space in the warehouse district in downtown Minneapolis, invited some of my CETA artist friends to come and check it out, and pretty soon we started an alternative art space there called Forecast Gallery. And Forecast was able to get some help through the Minneapolis Arts Commission to serve as a fiscal agent so we could try and write grants. And we funded artist projects in that space for about 10 months and then realized, why do we need to spend money on rent of a space when there's so many vacant storefronts and outdoor spaces that we could program, put all of the grant money into the hands of artists doing projects in public spaces? So Forecast became a public arts organization, and we became a facilitator of artists carrying out their own ideas, not a commissioning agency. So an artist-run organization that's about connecting artists with communities is really what Forecast started out doing. And so our mission is to strengthen and advance the field of public art locally, nationally, and internationally by expanding participation, supporting artists, informing audiences, and assisting communities. That's a mouthful, I know, but we do that through three main programs. Public Art Review, which has been around for 24 years now. I brought some copies with me, so if afterwards you're interested in actually seeing a copy or taking one home, there's a few outside in the hall. So it's been funded with NEA grants and foundation support, and since we went full color, we have advertisers now, about 50 advertisers. Public Art Review is actually an earned income program for Forecast, which I find to be amazing, but there are a lot of people interested in promoting their public art projects, and this is the magazine. So we now have subscribers in all 50 states and 20 foreign countries. And with recent support from the NEA, we're doing an archiving project with the University of Minnesota to digitize all the back issues, to put online the content of the past 24 years for free, to share as an educational resource. We also received a grant from the Andy Warhol Foundation to create the online companion for Public Art Review. I'm very excited that next year you'll actually be able to have a digital version of Public Art Review that comes out more frequently than every 6 months, which is what we've been doing. And of course, the opportunity of sharing the stories about public art with the technology you have online, the videos, the being able to walk around a sculpture and just see it from one view, to see a work be created over time, to see kinetic works in action, should really deepen the information that we're able to make available. So this partnership with the University of Minnesota will also engage research fellows to find new ways to share the growing number of stories. And for example, geocoding the projects that are documented in our digital archive will allow us to eventually make a smartphone application to be able to view the content, allow people to access the content and the stories in the communities on location wherever the art lives. So the idea that the archive can become accessible in your own communities where those stories are, and the history of public art can be shared with a much broader audience. We're also dealing with additional online resources. This year we established a toolkit for artists and communities exploring the field. So if you go to Forecast's website, you should check out that toolkit, and we're working now on a toolkit for teachers in K through 12, because public art is something that should be introduced before you get out of college. And there's very few programs in the country that are actually teaching public art. There are a few degree programs, but this is an area that needs to grow for sure. And it shouldn't be that we don't even hear the word design in K through 12 education. This is a crime. So if there's ways to give tools to teachers to bring that into the classroom and work with artists in the community, that's what we're working on. Now, Public Art Review has been an incredible calling card for me, and just last May I was invited to China to meet with some folks at the Shanghai University. Little did I know it, but there's a Chinese version of a public art magazine, which I couldn't read any of the copy, but the pictures were nice. And they've been doing it for about 2 years, publishing more frequently than us, but they had heard about us and they invited me over. We engaged in a conversation about could our two magazines work together and do some international research on what kind of projects are going on all over the world. And so just last month, we signed a contract with the University of Shanghai, and we're going to be spending $50,000 to hire researchers around the world to collect data on public art and placemaking all around the globe. It's a very exciting initiative that eventually will also be housed online for people to access, and some kind of award program, selecting some of the best of the examples we find and publishing them in both of our journals. We also have a consulting services program, which after we published for a while and built up a database of artists, we began consulting. And now we're serving dozens of communities each year with a variety of services. Planners, developers, community groups, foundations, museums. It's amazing when you have access to all these artists and resource information, how you start getting phone calls of people who are looking for artists. Can you help us? Can you help us develop a public art master plan for a new bicycle corridor? Can you help us develop best practices for our new programs? And in Minnesota, I don't know if you've heard about this, but in 2008, the voters of Minnesota passed a ballot initiative called the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment. A 1/8 cent sales tax was passed. This was an amazing thing for Minnesotans, and it got more votes than Obama, which in Minnesota, that's saying a lot. But basically, it's generating about $90 million a year for the next 25 years to help with environment and arts and cultural heritage projects throughout the state of Minnesota. And it's put Minnesota second only to New York in terms of per capita spending on the arts. It's pretty amazing. And it wasn't possible with the arts advocates by themselves or the environmentalists and hunters by themselves. When they realized they could join forces and do lobbying and advocacy, they could get the bill passed. So it's real interesting to see if actually the hunters are getting together with the artists to do projects now. But it's meant consulting opportunities for us all over the state, and it's just been incredible, and I see it as growing. And the beautiful part about it is even though we have a $6 billion deficit, the governor can't pull this money out to replace money that we're losing. So it's fixed for the arts for a long time to come. So if you want to move to Minnesota, or do your own legacy amendment here, maybe even better. We also have an artist services program. This started in 1989. We started giving grants to artists. After going project by project for our first 10 years, we developed a relationship with Jerome Foundation, and they have re-granting programs with the Loft for Writers, the Playwright Center for Playwrights, you know, these different art centers with different disciplines. And we said, how about a grant program for public artists? And they said, well, what does that look like? And so we actually got to invent our own re-granting program for the public art field. Their only requirement was it had to be for emerging artists. And we thought, well, that's great. It could be an incubator for artists who want to explore the public realm. So you can get R&D grants, which there's no place in the country I know of where you can get R&D grants to develop your ideas, to research your projects without an actual outcome. And then there's a category for public project funding, and we've traditionally given up to $7,000 for projects anywhere in the state, sites of your choosing, and artists apply every year, and we have independent selection panels review. And this year, with additional support from this legacy amendment, we've increased the funding pool from $24,000 to $35,000. And next year, with the help of McKnight Foundation, which thought this was a great idea, how about something for mid-career artists? We're giving out a $50,000 grant to an artist to do a project somewhere in the state of Minnesota, an independent project. So it's not a commissioning program. I just want to say that is kind of an outmoded notion now, I think. While a lot of city agencies are commissioning artists, there are a lot of artists with their own ideas of where they want to take public art. And I'm going to be showing you plenty of examples of both commissioned works and independent artist projects. People have been inspired by Christo and Jean-Claude. Take their own creativity where they want to go, pursue projects, raise their own money. They don't accept grants. They don't take commissions. They just figure out how to raise money for their own projects. So according to a study by Americans for the Arts, there's more than 350 government-run public art programs in the U.S. with ordinances and policies affecting about 100 million people every day. There are also dozens of nonprofit organizations and a growing number of educational institutions connecting artists with communities throughout the country. We know of artists working and influencing the community building world, designing the future of cities, and contributing to the development of meaningful placemaking. Public art is not an art form. It's a field of inquiry. It's not unlike medicine or science. There are artists who are specialists, and there are artists who are general practitioners. The practice of public art is one of trial and error, cause and effect. There are many cautionary tales, yet there are no standards. There's no licensing or degrees required. You can pretty much write your own job description. But I want to point out that artists are citizens, just like the rest of us. And public artists are citizens who have learned how to use public art as a civic catalyst. Can you tell that's from Minnesota? What you might want to note, though, is that's 1937, Paul and Babe, and it's standing today as a symbol for Bemidji, Minnesota. So if artists are citizens, I would say public artists are citizens who have learned how to use public art as a civic catalyst. When artists and art are brought into a place, it's usually for the better. Arts reanimate and build communities, and they reinvigorate our lives. Where there's art, there's civic engagement. The arts bring people together. Art helps us all respond to our changing world, changing taste, changing culture. I believe there's a cultural revolution taking place in the U.S. and around the world as more and more communities recognize that cultural resources are essential to thriving communities. Over the past decade, the public art field has moved from the margins to the center of this important cultural shift. As such, public art is no longer defined as just murals, monuments, and memorials. Today, it's a broad spectrum of activities, a field of inquiry that encompasses building, community building, placemaking, social practice, public engagement, interactive art making, and street culture. a vibrant melting pot that directly connects artists with people in communities, both large and small. Public art is now about the connecting of creative practices with the needs of communities to build a more caring, capable, and sustainable world. Not because art intrinsically contributes to that end, but because art has been successfully used to advance specific social, economic, and cultural definitions of community health. So as the publisher of the leading journal in the field, Forecast is a national translator for the public realm, art that goes way beyond the making of objects. We've become a central hub for a field that is on the verge of transforming itself from a community sideline to Main Street influence. We found our purpose in an emerging local, national, international continuum of innovative work that is redefining the very notion of what public art is and what it can do. Over the past few years, you might recognize some of these more historical images, and I'm going to reference some of them later. Over the past few years, we've been fortunate to witness an explosion in the field, and with it a shift in interest by foundations and individual patrons. More attention is being paid to artists working in the community and the potential impact it can have on community development. Several major foundations have reprioritized their gift-making to focus on the role of the artists in community development equation. Community art or arts organizations serving communities are being funded at higher levels. It's hard to believe in a tough economy, but in the Twin Cities, in Minnesota, the McKnight Foundation actually has lowered their priority for funding museums and traditional venues and increased their funding of what they call artist-centric organizations. Because they argued, without the artists, what kind of arts funding, what are we doing with our arts funding? So the Knight Foundation also, which is based out of Florida but has 9 cities they serve around the country, they have a new initiative called Random Acts of Culture. I don't know if you've heard of this, but you might want to check it out. The Kresge Foundation invests heavily in community cultural development and what they refer to as cross-sector arts initiatives. The NEA has shifted its focus with major grants to cities partnering with the arts. Just last week, they announced a new initiative in partnership with 11 of America's top foundations, working in conjunction with the NEA and 7 federal agencies. Entitled Art Place, it aims to drive revitalization across the country by putting arts at the center of economic development. In St. Paul, where we have our offices, a group called Springboard for the Arts, which is an economic and community development organization for artists, received a 3-year grant of $750,000 to support hundreds of artists working in communities along the new Central Corridor. It's a light rail line connecting the Twin Cities. It's now under construction. And according to Springboard's executive director, Laura Zabel, they plan to, quote, demonstrate that artists are a powerful, creative force to be mobilized during major infrastructure projects like this. We know that these creative people who live and work along the corridor can engage communities and build lasting cross-sector relationships through projects that are practical, fun, and surprising. Ultimately, we think this can be a model for cities across the country. Cities with public art programs are facing severe financial problems. Some programs have been eliminated altogether. Some have funds for art, but are losing staff. Some have staff, but the budgets for the art have dropped to an all-time low. There are numerous aging collections with inadequate maintenance budgets. Some programs are searching for ways to reinvent themselves, revise their ordinances, adapt to the changing times, embrace temporary projects and events. How many of you have heard of Parking Day? Well, it happened just last Saturday, September 17th every year. It's started by a group out of San Francisco called Rebar. And basically it means you or any artist can take over a parking space for a day and do whatever you want with that parking space. As long as you're plugging the meter, you're not breaking any law. And in this case, you're creating a small park right on the street. Get people to think about what kind of ways do we use public space, and could we do something better with some of the parking spaces we have. It's important to note that much of what's happening in the field is not publicly funded, nor managed by government agencies. Arts commissions and Department of Cultural Affairs, however, can play an extremely important role in facilitating large civic projects. And Kansas City is clearly ripe for a larger civic agency that can maintain and promote the city as a hub for the arts and generate public-private partnerships to cultivate the rich cultural identity you have established here. You have an amazing foundation on which to build here, and I'm interested afterwards, we get into a little Q&A to talk about your particular situation here, because I think Kansas City is poised to be the hub in the country because of all the connectedness you have with your culture here. There's also a critical role for private nonprofit and educational institutions, liturgical and corporate support systems, grants and fellowships, and independently produced efforts, self-taught folk artists, visionaries forging their own paths. Indeed, pioneering artists are expanding the definition of public art every day. This is a group out of Seattle, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. When I retire, this is my game plan right here. Public art serves as a kind of barometer of the cultural climate. When I travel and look at public art in different cities around the world, the art I see tells me a great deal about the place and the people who live there. So in Bemidji, it's Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. It's a folk art masterpiece. They value the mythical stories about the Great North Woods and embrace cultural tourism. There's probably more photos of Babe and Paul Bunyan than just about anything in Minnesota. They know the value of tourism for their economy. And that sculpture has served them since 1937. In St. Louis, where I grew up, they have the Arch. It's a bicentennial landmark. It's a gateway to the West. The Arch is synonymous with St. Louis. It speaks to their civic pride. I don't know if you know this, but under the leg of one of the legs of the arch is a time capsule. And when I was in third grade, in 1963, when they were about to build the arch, all the third graders in St. Louis got to write something on a piece of paper that's buried in that time capsule. I got to write something. I don't remember what I wrote, but I remember that I got to participate. And it's a long time since then. I don't think they'll ever dig it up, and I don't think it was anything profound, but it might have affected my, thoughts about my own career. But it was that idea that everybody could participate somehow in a civic landmark. And when a city has no public art, what does that say? They haven't figured out how to express themselves. They haven't done any, they don't value creativity. They never traveled to see what other cities have done. They lack civic pride. They don't care what visitors think, or maybe all of the above. That cultural barometer. I could tell a lot about Kansas City by just driving around and looking at your art and architecture. Your skyline just changed dramatically. What does that say about your city and your values? It says a whole lot to me. Bigger question might be, what makes good public art? Believe me, I struggle with this question every day. This is a great project in Berkeley, California. Photographs of kids who use the pool turned into digital photographs, then turned into mosaics on the wall of the pool. So those are photographs. You don't have to be a painter to do murals anymore. So what makes good public art? Well, let's start right here at Johnson County Community College. I would say it depends who you ask. And some of the most controversial public art has later become some of the most well-loved and admired. The Arch, for example, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty. The list goes on, okay? Perhaps controversy and even contempt early on is a sign that the art is great, but you need to give it a decade or more. How patient are you? Does the art get moved like Sarah's tilted ark before it's possibly recognized for the greatness that it is? Or maybe not? We all perceive things differently. However slightly our perceptions may vary. Well, we all judge things differently too. So an important conversation happening in the public art world right now is assessment. How do we measure what constitutes good in public art when we have no empirical yardstick? So what might be considered good public art in New York City might not be so in Chicago or here in Kansas City. The average person at a bus stop might have a different opinion. Or at a light rail station in Minneapolis, where Andrew Lester did this project. Might have a different opinion than, say, the artists, funders. There's no in-depth research studies have been done that focus on public art and the change it can bring to a place or a community. The evidence defending the importance of public art is mostly anecdotal. Here's a parking garage in Cincinnati. But this doesn't tell the whole story, and not even the most important stories. Public art is not for sale. This notion stands in opposition to art in galleries or ticketed events. It isn't about capitalism, nor selling products in the marketplace. Public art is about the free sharing of ideas and opinions in the public realm. It is democracy at its creative best. So this is a balcony of the the under construction Museum of Visionary Art in Baltimore. Incredible place you have to visit if you ever get to Baltimore. And a bird's house. Birds are part of the audience for public art too. Here's a bird project in Washington State. The artist made about 100 clay birds and gave them away at the farmer's market. And there they all are, and you could take the bird and put it wherever you wanted around the city, and then your goal was to do a little, tweeting to your friends where the birds were located. And people would go on scavenger hunts to find the birds, and they would basically migrate around the city, and the artists realized they may never come back to the farmer's market, but that was the idea. A small and intimate scale and very low budget. This is a kind of project that could change your daily life. Your experience, at least for that moment. Or how about this sky bridge between the parking garage and the airport in Sacramento, California, where you're already taking off like a bird before you even get to your plane. Or a performance troupe who used a flatbed truck to travel around Minnesota, go to festivals and fairs. Instant stage, instant audience, no problem. And they would have discussions with their audience afterwards to get feedback. So how do we measure the experience of art in the community? How can we assign value to the emotional impact of a Vietnam Veterans Memorial? It's the stories behind and about public art and the stories that good public art generates in the community that tell us who we are and who we want to be and what's important in the world. This is a trompe l'oeil mural in Frederick, Maryland. Can you tell who's the real person in this? It's the woman walking down the sidewalk. Everybody else is just painted on the wall. Philadelphia is the mural capital, for sure, of this country, with over 1,200 murals, and this is one of the largest mosaic murals in the world, over 1 million tiles, created by Josh Sarentitis. And here's a detail of it. He created a software program where he could take his digital files, the images, the artwork, and have the digital images translated into a scheme for the mosaic tiles to be laid out so they would mimic the bits of information that you have that make up the entire image. It's pretty amazing. But it's, again, a combination of old technology and new to create a mural that's going to last a long time. And a fascinating process. Here's another large-scale mural in Minneapolis. It's a great story. This developer got to purchase some parking garages the city of Minneapolis was trying to sell. And the city said, you know, as long as, if we sell you these ramps, you have to do a beautification effort. And so the developer thought, great, you know, I'll paint the parking garage and put some nice brickwork around the base. And they said, well, you should probably call Forecast and ask for some, you know, advice on that. And I went to a meeting with the architects and I said, so what's your plan? And they showed me this great plan for how they were going to turn this old white parking ramp into maybe an updated beige parking ramp. And I said, well, what kind of paint are you using? Oh, it's this great acrylic paint. I said, well, does it come in more than one color? And they said, well, yeah, sure, of course. Here's the swatch. I said, well, I would say it might be worth your while to pay an artist to design something that you can use. If you're going to paint it anyway, why not paint it with lots of color instead of one or two? So for about $25,000 more, there's a 300-foot-long mural. The artist was inspired by Monet's water lilies, and he took a section of the painting and blew it up again digitally so that each pixel was 10 feet by 10 feet. And then he mixed all the colors to correspond with each pixel, wrote a number on each bucket of paint, did a snap-line grid on the parking garage, and wrote the number on there, and gave it to the painting contractors and said, it's paint by numbers, you can do this. And look what they got. Compare, I wish I had the before shot because this was really one of the ugliest garages in the city. There's a close-up. Okay, what's going on here? Alice in Wonderland, but distorted. You get down on the plaza, though, and look in the cylindrical mirror, and it comes into focus, like a turn-of-the-century parlor game. Placemaking of an interesting sort. Tampa, Florida, City of Lights, now commissions artists to do temporary and permanent light art. This is by Stephen, I want to say Kaufman, I don't think that's right, but he's an amazing light artist. And he adds these colored glass and reflective glass around the light fixtures to create this effect. University campuses all over the place are doing incredible art on campus, and this one's in San Diego. In Europe, you're going to see more artist-designed play spaces than you will here in this country. This one's in England. This is a playground in St. Louis, Missouri by an amazing artist who really knows how to work with concrete, a guy named Bob Casilli. And if you've never seen the City Museum, go to St. Louis and see the City Museum. It's an artist playground and one of the most unbelievable places. You wonder how they got their liability insurance with kids climbing around it. Today, more artists are engaged in public practice and social engagement, community building experiments. Civic engagement and manifesting our democracy is a recurring theme in public art, and it seems to be prevalent today as we find ourselves questioning the very democratic systems we put into place 250 years ago. Another artist playground. An artist who transformed a piece of playground equipment that couldn't be used anymore into a sculpture for a community. Reusing a corn crib from a farm in Minnesota and weaving it with fiber lines and putting lights in there that are solar powered so it's off the grid. So at night when you walk into this corn crib, it's an amazing environment that you're surrounded by. That's by Randy Walker. The Minnesota Landscape Arboretum invites artists every year to come out and do installations. This was a whole series of artist-designed tree houses. Artists working with high school students to create gathering places using plant material and landforms. The artist was from Scotland and wanted to recreate some of the berms and earthen walls, and got the school students to help with the creation of the work. So the kids had it as a gathering place. They created it. It was theirs. That sense of ownership is something that artists can engender in a public art project. It doesn't happen with a lot of architecture. Architects don't normally let everybody participate in the design and building. And that's something that public art can do that's quite unique. There's a commons movement underway in this country and around the world. It's a growing social and political movement that believes the commons is a crucial sector of the economy and society and a useful prism for talking about resources that should be shared. Libraries like this one and parks are prime examples, but also Starbucks. It's a common space, and so it doesn't have to be publicly owned or maintained. Anybody can go into Starbucks. You don't have to order a coffee. You could just go in there, use the bathroom, or hang out. Now, why would Starbucks think that's a good business strategy? It's obviously working. It's your third place. Besides home and work, you can just go hang out there and go online. It's a great business strategy. The privatization of public spaces, however, is more pervasive now than ever. And what does this do to our sense of the commons? There are privately owned parks and privately owned sculpture gardens that are open 24 hours to the public. There's more private control of public space. There's more security. There's more monitoring. In fact, Google will soon be snaking their way into our workplaces and homes right here in Kansas City, for better or worse. This is an issue that demands dialogue, and it demands policies. It's the greatest opportunity for democracy opportunity you probably have ever had. And I encourage you, I implore you, seize this. Don't be left out of that conversation, because it's a chance for you to shape what kind of world you want to create with that opportunity that they're presenting you with. It's not about corporate takeover of your community if you choose to look at it as an opportunity for you to build the public system that you want with it. Cultural tourism and strategies using public art, such as large plastic animals on the sidewalks of American cities. Since Chicago's Cows on Parade more than 15 years ago, there have been dozens of flora and fauna on the streetscapes, painted by artists, sold at auctions, and serving causes such as children with cancer. This is art as a means to an end, not art as an end in itself. And there's more chambers of commerce around the country now that are talking about public art than ever before. They may not know what good public art is, but they know that public art can get people to move around a city just like a dotted line, a progressive dinner. There's one cow, there's another, there's another. I have to walk to all of them to take pictures with my kids. What a brilliant strategy for getting me to go to every retail space and restaurant along the way. Yeah, so why are chambers of commerce interested in public art now, I wonder? So artists working with youth to build boats, to create community medallions and markers that get cast in iron and put in communities to mark places that are important. Artists taking green Adirondack chairs and putting them on the front lawn of Minnesota State Capitol for one day. That's 1,000 chairs built by teenagers over the summer, put on the front lawn of the state capitol for one day as a public art event. People were able to come, sit, enjoy their capitol. It's your front lawn. That's where Adirondack chairs belong. But people were so enamored of the idea of this artist, Joel Sisson, working with these teenagers who were pretty much jobless for the summer and looking for things to get into, and he thought, why don't they build chairs? We can sell them, we can do public art installations with them, we can build big chairs, and then besides the state capitol, how about the nation's capitol? And he took 2 big chairs and 50 regular chairs, each representing a state in the Union, to Washington, D.C., set them up by the Washington Monument, not far from the White House. He was hoping he could get President Clinton and Newt Gingrich to come sit in the chairs at the time. Well, that did not happen. We did get the National Parks Mounted Police to come and pose for photographs. But one of the interesting things about this installation, and it was a great adventure, one of the best experiences of my career, people would come to Washington, D.C., you know, from all over the country, and they'd come to this site, and they'd walk into the circle of chairs, and he had strategically painted the outline of each state on the back of the chair, okay? And put the state motto on the front of the chair. And people would walk into the circle, and they'd look around, they'd look for their chair, and they'd go sit in it. Like, this is my chair. I just thought that was brilliant. And that sense of ownership, this is my part of the circle. And of course, if you sit in the big chairs, well, the artist was inspired by the Edith Ann character, Lily Tomlin Page. And if you've ever sit in a really big chair, you feel like a little kid. And I figured it out. It's just a simple psychology. When you were this big and you were sitting in a regular Adirondack chair, felt that big. So when you sit in a big chair like this, that's how you feel, like a little kid again. You can't help but smile. So public artists are in the experience business, really. How do you create experiences for people? How do you subtly manipulate people? Go sit in your chair. It wasn't stated. There was no sign. It's like the dance steps on the sidewalk in Seattle that the artist created. People walk along and think, there's dance instruction steps. They start doing the dance. That subtle manipulation that public art can have can change your daily experience, possibly your life. So we have skyways in Minnesota, mainly because of the cold. You have a few here too. But in Minneapolis, they'd never been used for art, and this artist got a grant from Forecast and started doing installations in the skyways. And she was impressed with the statement that one of our mayors made in the Twin Cities. He said that in the public school system now, because of the diversity and the welcoming environment for immigrants in the Twin Cities, there's now 120 languages spoken in the public schools. And this artist was just flabbergasted with that thought. She said, who are these people? Where do they come from? What's their story? And so she started interviewing these people from different countries who came to Minnesota and looking at their photographs and asking them if she could take one of their photographs and a story about home and what it meant to them and scan the image and enlarge it and print it on a white scrim material, a translucent material, put it in the windows of the skyways with their word for home, as you can see printed above, so that each person's story could be told about coming to Minnesota from their home and how Minnesota is now their home and what that means and what their story was. So Speaking of Home became this award-winning project. It's the first one in the skyways, and it proved that the skyways are excellent venues for public art of a temporary nature. It looks good at night, too. Billboards have been used by artists for a long time, and of course, advertising space, there are things you can get away with and things that you can't. This one is one of the more controversial billboard projects that I've ever been involved in. It was in St. Paul, and it was installed right before the Republican National Convention. And the artist clearly had intention of raising awareness of what soldiers really go through. She did these portraits of soldiers between tours of duty in Iran and Afghanistan while that they were at a base in upstate New York. And instead of doing a traditional portrait, she asked them to lay their head down on the table. And, you know, it's this gaze that they had in their eyes that maybe made this very controversial, that people may interpret this in a way that the artist may not have intended. But she meant to drive people to this website, which you can still go to, soldiersface.com. And the controversy around it was the openness to interpretation. And that people driving down the street might actually, you know, get distracted. And certainly the Republican convention might not be too excited about bringing awareness to the stories of soldiers in between tours of duty. And so what happened was, before she got permission to use this billboard, she tried to get Clear Channel to give her permission, and they turned her down. And she filed a lawsuit, and it was in the New York Times, and it was one of those interesting stories because Interestingly enough, she did the same project in Denver during the DNC and got permission to do the same project. Well, that certainly raised suspicion. Same billboard used by another artist who moved to the Twin Cities from Vietnam, talking about the Hmong culture wars. And this is an interesting project in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a permanent billboard commissioned by the city, and one of the more political public art projects that I've ever seen publicly funded. I mean, it's clear what some of the message is here. So it's kind of interesting. You just installed this IOU sculpture here, and it's on city property. And it obviously is making some political commentary. And I think it's incredible. The city has the willingness to let somebody make a statement that's not overt, but it's suggestive, and allow for that creative artistic license to have its voice. It says a lot about your culture and your values here. There might be some people who had their feathers ruffled. That's what stimulates the dialogue. That's what might later on determine what really is great art. So, in conclusion, I'm not going to do my conclusion yet. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides. I got a lot of slides, so I better get through them. Okay, what do you do with chain link fence? There's actually an artist in Seattle who's figured out, again, how to take digital images and translate them into these white plastic caps that fit on, lock onto the chain link, and can make a digital image that reads as a photograph from a distance. And he got commissioned to do the San Jose airport parking garage. This is the largest mural in the country. This was the rendering that was used to help sell the project, basically photographing hands of people in the community and translating them to black and white images that could be done with that technique on a very, very large scale. Okay, for something completely different, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. You know, memorials, they're not going to go away. And ever since the Vietnam Memorial, I think the whole design and concept of memorials has changed for people. And this is Daniel Liebenstein's memorial. So architects are participating, obviously, in public placemaking. The experience is really what we're talking about here. And the powerful emotions that people can create through design is what's at stake. I don't know if you've heard of the artist from Philadelphia, Lily Ye. She's a Chinese artist that moved to Philadelphia and created the Village of Arts and Humanities. An amazing artist. She was invited on a residency in Africa and dealt with a community in Rwanda. This is the before site, okay? And this is a community that went through terrible tragedies. So she worked with the neighborhood, the community around this area, to totally transform this site. Through rebuilding, through creating a landscape, through creating a commemorative space. Now it looks like this. And a place to commemorate and memorialize and remember and honor. So, you know, it just says a whole lot about the power of art to transform place and to honor people who've suffered and to send messages to future generations. With the downturn in the economy, there's lots of vacant storefronts. Artists are your frontline core of army people to go out and take over those spaces, let me tell you. It doesn't cost much, but you don't need to have a for rent sign in your vacant storefronts, in your commercial corridors, or any other place for that matter. This is simply paper put in the windows of a storefront that had been empty for years in downtown Minneapolis. Theater is much closer, I think, to the public art experience than, say, the passive viewing of art on the museum walls. So if you've had theater background, I think you're more likely to move into public art than if you've just trained to paint paintings to put on walls in quiet environments where you're not supposed to talk or touch the art. In public art, it's a dynamic interaction with your audience. And it's a group process where different people play different roles to make something happen. You can also have fun with it. Send messages that are pretty overt. This is fun. This is called It All Matters. And it's a portable video photo booth. So you know what a photo booth is. You walk in, you get your picture taken. Well, this one they can pull with bicycles. And then you sit inside it, and you can put different backdrops behind you, or pull something down and put your face through so it looks like you're somebody else. And then there's a video camera, and you're supposed to answer the question, what matters to you? And then the artist has this thing online of all these responses to the question of what matters to you. It's fascinating, interactive, and portable public art piece. And of course, you could buy a bike rack out of a catalog, right? But for a little more money, you could get this kind of a bike rack. Okay, which would you rather have? Or a tree grate? Or a bench? And if you just did nothing but artist design benches in your city, you'd be doing yourself a huge favor. Benches come in all shapes and sizes. They can be commemorative. They can be expensive or cheap. They can be wall-mounted. A bridge can be anything but a bridge if you have an enlightened public works director like they have in Wichita, Kansas. There's no percent for art ordinance in Wichita. There's an enlightened public works director said, I want an artist involved in every bridge we build. So who would think Wichita, Kansas has one of the most innovative bridge programs in the country? But it's not because they're forced to do it. It's because somebody in charge inside City Hall says, this is what I want to do. And people respond positively, so he gets to keep his job. What about a HUD home that's going to be torn down? Why not let an artist in there, take all the floorboards out, create this incredible vortex through the middle of the building before it gets torn down? It could be transformed into an amazing art space. This is in Houston. Is that a showstopper or what? Okay, so now you all know about balloons and things you can inflate, and you've probably seen those roadside flapping things, right? Why not give artists an opportunity to do inflatables? This is an artist who took over a vacant building in France, put some octopus tentacles. This is called Occupied. But you can imagine it coming out of the windows of a van or whatever. Very creative, very inexpensive. Is the media going to pay attention to this public art? Is the artist going to get virally sent out throughout the internet around the world? Why would an artist want to do public art? Let me think. Seriously, when you think about career development choices that you can make as a creative person, you could show your art in a gallery and try and sell it for a couple bucks. Or you could do this kind of work and be internationally known almost instantaneously. Let me think. Which would I rather be doing? The thing is, the educational system isn't necessarily helping artists realize they could be doing this kind of work. How do we help change the educational institutions, start training artists to think collaboratively, working in the communities, recycling materials, using environmental materials to create projects, literally transforming spaces, even if it's just for a summer. And this is in Thailand, where they have a summer installation with environmental artists in residence. You're not going to see many icebergs that are red, but this is an artist who took over an iceberg and had these boats with, the fire hoses, shooting red food coloring to color an iceberg. Or color the bluffs and the sheep. Try getting the Army Corps of Engineers to allow you to string that over the river. That was the toughest challenge for the artist. So how important is it for a city agency or a facilitator to be there to help the artist create? It's incredibly important. If not for that help, the artist is at the mercy of these huge bureaucracies. It's too easy for them to say no. Andy Goldsworthy? Anybody else a big fan? We never really get to see these pieces in person, so if not for the photographs and the documentation, we wouldn't have the pleasure. So some public art only exists in photographic form. Some art only lasts a few seconds before it falls apart. Have any of you seen the documentary film Rivers and Tides? It's all about Andy Goldsworthy. I highly recommend it. Just amazing. Snow. You don't have to stop doing public art in the winter, I just want to tell you. And of course, everybody's inspired by Robert Smith and his Spiral Jetty, which was in the Great Salt Lake. It wasn't meant to last forever. And eventually, it got covered when the water rose and covered it up for many years. And only about 10 years ago, the lake started to dry up, and there was Spiral Jetty re-emerging. Now there's this effort to try and restore it. And some people are arguing that is not what the artist probably intended. Okay, here's one of my favorite intimate public art projects. It's called Pocket Biosphere. It's by Von Bell, who lives in Washington, okay? So audiences can adopt one to take home and feed it daily. It takes a drop of water to keep it alive. You have to feed it daily, and you have to sign adoption papers if you want to take one home that says you promise to give it a drop of water every day or it will die. So it's one of the most clever metaphors for our fragile environment. You know, you form an emotional attachment and you realize your personal responsibility for our larger ecosystem. All right, how many of you have done yarn bombing? How many of you knitters out there? This is taking over the world, I'm quite convinced. You can knit almost anything now. There's cozies for buses. There's parking meters that have been covered. This was on the streets of New York last month. I saw it parked next to the bikes. This is some of the smallest public art in the world, okay? No bigger than an inch. So you might easily walk down the street and miss this British artist's work. But it looks great close up. These tourists are definitely enjoying the streetscape. Or how about some organic graffiti, okay? If you spray the right materials onto a wall, it'll actually grow moss. Okay, Post-it note mural. Now we're talking about civic engagement and dialogue. What do people do? What do they write on Post-it notes? I think it's giving you a hint. So people saw this and they started writing their things to do, or what they think you should do. And, you know, they got political, but this is a fascinating project for taking the temperature of a community. Put up Post-it notes and see what people write and collect them. It's telling you something about that community. Here's a great project, do-it-yourself public art. You download your own thought bubble or speak bubble, print it out on sticker labels, and you can put them anywhere on advertising. What do you want people to be saying or thinking? You write in the caption, okay? So public art isn't just about the artist creating, it's about the artist creating something that allows you to be a creator in the community. Oh, here's a great one. This is an artist in Vienna, decided to cover up all the advertising in a downtown section of the city for a day. All ads will be obliterated with this yellow. Now, you might think the shop owners would object, and they were, of course, very concerned. But what happened was when you literally created this kind of environment, it drew so many more people to come and see what was going on that the business increased. Now, who would have thought covering up advertising would increase business? It's like some kind of reverse psychology strategy. But it also shows you how much space is taken up with signs and advertising. Here's another do-it-yourself. Any TV screen, right? You don't need to watch TV. You could turn it into your own kinetic artwork. So there's, again, I think a website you can go to where you can learn how to basically take some wax paper, create a box that fits over your television set, or in this case, one of those video advertising screens over the subway entrance. And it basically turns the video image into just basically kinetic, abstract art. It's even better at home. When you're going to build a building, you put up scaffolding. Why not use that scaffolding as support for art, temporary art? Why not hang letters and program words that people can program from their phone? Create spaces with dialogues using light. This is one of Dennis Oppenheim's pieces. Dennis Oppenheim, one of the great pioneers of public art, died last year, and this was a project that basically recreated a battle scene on the plaza. Civic spaces, technology that allows new kinds of imagery to be made permanent. So photographic imagery can be now used permanently in outdoor signage and text. Space and placemaking, you know, there's so much being done. I could spend another few hours showing you examples of ways that buildings are being recreated with light facades using LED, with plazas and fountains. The list goes on, but you get the idea. There's no limit to the imaginations artists can bring to even the undersides of bridges. This is San Antonio and their famous Riverwalk. They are now doing major commissioning under every bridge that the Riverwalk goes through. And they've expanded a couple more miles. We're talking millions of dollars. This is Donald Lipsky, by the way, who I believe has a project right here. The Rodin's The Thinker, thinking and thinking. Okay, I get it. Or LED and steam in a wall that changes dramatically from moment to moment and at night. Or Ned Kahn, who can treat the surface of a parking garage outside the Twins Stadium in Minnesota, and the slightest breeze makes the whole wall undulate. It's called The Wave. And he was inspired by the wave people do at the ball stadium, and it's basically these little hinged aluminum plates. Okay, umbrellas. I do have to admit I have a thing for umbrellas and public art using umbrellas. So this is an artist in Budapest who got 3,000 people to stand on a bridge over the Danube River holding an umbrella that was roughly the color of the river, standing close enough together that from the air, hopefully, the bridge would appear to disappear. Not a bad attempt. Or an umbrella flash mob event in front of that Ned Kahn. Anybody been in a flash mob event or seen one? What is a flash mob event? Any of you wondering? Okay, everybody knows by now. That's sort of these random acts of culture. Okay, here's a prototype of an internet umbrella. We can get Google here. We can get Google to do the umbrella thing. So you got your map. It's on your umbrella. You could see it while you're walking around. Where am I going? I can get a feed. But you just have to be careful watching when you're walking across the street. High-tech interactive light sculpture. You touch the railing and you're actually changing the colors in the light tubes that are hanging. This is a really cool piece in a multi-cinema complex by Camille Utterback. And now with the handheld technology, you can find out about the public art where you are, which makes perfect sense. There's very little information at the public art project, maybe a sign if you're lucky. But what is the story? And there's usually lots of stories. So now smartphone technology knows where you are. It knows what public art is nearby. I'm looking forward to the time when I can drive around and my phone starts buzzing and says if I turn right at the next corner and go 3 blocks out of my way, there's the coolest mural you've ever seen. That's what I want. Okay? I'm the mural cultural tourist. Help me find the stuff. So Google, this is for you, okay? This should be very easy to accomplish here. So, and I just want to close with some thoughts. And, you know, in case you didn't know it, fireworks is public art too. You've been a fan of public art all your life. You didn't even know it. And if fireworks isn't public art, I ask you, what is it? Pyrotechnics is an art form, and it's been practiced for a long time. It's just we call it fireworks. So there's lots of things that actually are public art. We just don't call them that. We have a vocabulary problem. And so I want to just start by saying there's a way to perhaps get this ball rolling. Is there a way to create standards that will guarantee you good public art for years to come in your community? So here's my stab at it. Number one, place art and artists at the center of the public art sphere and be supportive of all artistic disciplines, and permanent art as well as temporary. Consider the common good, our shared environment, and enjoyment by the public. 3, honor all participants in the process and promote mutual respect. Be mindful, ethical, professional, and open to different opinions. Utilize fair contracts that provide adequate time, compensation, clear scope, and decent working conditions for artists and clients. Documentation, promotion, and criticism should fairly represent the work and be freely accessible for educational use. The content of a public art project should consider its context. Now, we could talk for an hour just about this idea. But I would say that's a really good measuring stick right there. If the artwork has nothing to do with the place it's in, has no relationship that you could possibly ascertain, it's probably not good public art. Or maybe it belongs somewhere else and it could be good somewhere else. Use all materials and technology wisely. Well, that's not just for public art, that's for just about anything. Do not commission art that cannot properly be maintained within its appropriate lifetime. And why do I say that? It doesn't have to be permanent. Public art, you can have a lifespan that's 5 to 10 years. There is nothing wrong with that. Once it starts deteriorating and you can't afford to take care of it, it's better if you take it out than watch it get worse and worse. It becomes a liability instead of an asset. It becomes expensive. Why not put your resources to better use? Be thoughtful when citing a work of art. Don't expect artists to fix every problem or address every issue. And this is to protect artists mostly, but people ask artists, now I want you to do this, and it has to do this, and by the way, can you solve the world crisis? And finally, our 10th commandment, pursue the creation of high-quality public art with originality, innovation, spirit, vision, and courage, and strike a chord in the hearts and minds of broad and diverse audiences. Thank you.